Misperceived as Paranormal Activity, Part 2. A month ago, we had a podcast entitled Misperceived as Paranormal Activity. I thought that it would be beneficial to expand on that and discuss more situations where activity can be misperceived as paranormal when it's Xenonormal. Xenonormal means it's normal in nature, but unfamiliar. In the previous podcast, I discussed electromagnetic radiation, infrasound and ultrasound, which are sound frequencies below and above our hearing capabilities, pareidolia, which is our mind's attempt to find patterns in randomness, quantum entanglement, which is theory in science that people or animals can be connected to each other at the quantum level, Palinopsia, which is a phenomenon where you will see something even though you are no longer directly looking at it, sleep paralysis, which is a phenomenon that occurs when you are waking up or falling asleep and is temporarily a feeling where you are unable to speak or move or may have difficulty breathing, small animals and creatures in the walls, plumbing and HVAC sounds, house material setting, claustrophobia, and deja vu. Now let's get into other things that can be misperceived as paranormal activity. Some of these technical definitions came from dictionary.com, webmd.com, merriam-webster.com, or wikipedia.com. Apophenia, the tendency to perceive a connection or meaningful pattern between unrelated or random things, such as objects or ideas. Autokinesis, a phenomenon of visual perception in which a stationary, small point of light in an otherwise dark or featureless environment appears to move. It presumably occurs because motion perception is always relative to some reference point. A paranormal example would be while investigating, you fixate on a point of light and it seems to begin to move when it really isn't, and it is misinterpreted as paranormal activity. Availability cascade, a self-reinforcing cycle that explains the development of certain kinds of collective beliefs. A novel idea or insight, usually one that seems to explain a complex process in a simple or straightforward manner, gains rapid currency in the popular discourse by its very simplicity and by its apparent insightfulness. Its rising popularity triggers a chain reaction within the social network. Individuals adopt a new insight because other people within the network have adopted it, and on its face it seems plausible. Basically, someone may have suggested something to you or you felt something may have been paranormal, and it kind of just gains traction over time, kind of like the old telephone game. Barnum effect. The tendency to accept a certain information as true, such as character assessments or horoscopes, even when the information is so vague as to be worthless. Chronostasis. A type of temporal illusion in which the first impression following the introduction of a new event or task demand to the brain can appear to extend in time, basically when time seems to stand still. Cryptomensia. This is an occurrence that describes when a forgotten memory returns without it being recognized as such by the subject, who believes it is something new and original. It is a memory bias whereby a person may falsely recall generating a thought, an idea, a tune, a name, or a joke, not deliberately engaging in plagiarism, but rather experiencing a memory as if it was a new inspiration. An example would be someone had a dream that when they were 16, that was of a paranormal experience, and somehow it pops into their mind 20 years later, and the person doesn't remember having the dream or where the memory comes from, so they're convinced that they went through a recent paranormal experience. Hypnagogic hallucinations. These are hallucinations that occur as you're falling asleep. When you experience these hallucinations, you see, hear, or feel things that aren't actually there. Hypnopotic hallucinations. Hallucinations that occur as you're waking up. When you experience these hallucinations, you see, hear, or feel things that aren't actually there. Mandela effect. The Mandela effect is a phenomenon in which a person or group of people have false or distorted memories. Some believe that the Mandela effect is proof of alternate realities, while others blame it on the fallibility of human memory. This effect often leads to Cryptomensia. Misophonia, a condition in which individuals experience intense anger and disgust when they are confronted with sounds made by other human beings. New house effect. When you move into a new location and aren't familiar with all the sounds, sights, and smells and perceive them as paranormal. Observer expectancy effect. The observer expectancy effect, also called the experimenter expectancy effect, expectancy bias, observer effect, or experimenter effect is a form of reactivity in which a researcher's cognitive bias causes them to subconsciously influence the participants of experiment. Confirmation bias can lead to the experimenter interpreting results incorrectly because of the tendency to look for information that conforms to the hypothesis and overlook information that argues against it. In the paranormal field, that means someone who goes into investigation biased that a location has equipment and personal experience activity and interprets any type of activity to be paranormal because they want it to be so. They may also attempt to convince others that benign occurrences has to be paranormal activity. Basically, that means if someone's a client, they, for some reason, believe that their house is paranormal or has paranormal activity, I should say, and regardless of what is said to them or what they may experience, they're convinced that there is paranormal activity, so any sight, sound, smell will often be perceived as paranormal activity, even when it's completely benign. Parasomnia. A sleep disorder that involves unusual and undesirable physical effects or experiences that disrupt your sleep. A parasomnia event can occur before or during sleep or during arousal from sleep. If you have parasomnia, you might have abnormal movements, talk, express emotions, or do unusual things. Often this is something that is misinterpreted as paranormal activity. Pareidolia. In the last podcast we discussed visual pareidolia, but it can also be something that affects your hearing. Situations such as ear barotrauma, which is ear-plane ear, tinnitus, which can be a humming, clicking, ringing, or buzzing in the ear, and musical ear syndrome, which is when you're hearing music that isn't there, have also caused people to perceive paranormal activity that isn't there. Peripheral drift vision. This phenomenon refers to a motion illusion generated by the presentation of a sawtooth luminance grating in the visual periphery. Basically, it's an optical illusion that can occur when looking at certain patterns, whether it be something on a television, on your computer, or portable electronic device, in photos, etc. This illusion can be misperceived as paranormal phenomenon. Scopastasia. The physical staring effect is a theorized phenomenon in which humans detect being stared at by extrasensory means. Basically, is the feeling of being watched. You may hear one of my kittens meowing here in the background. She's looking for some attention. Semmelweis reflex. In basic terms, it means that you believe that your house has paranormal activity and that you would reject any evidence that suggests otherwise, no matter how convincing or factual it is. Sleep deprivation. It is important to understand the effects of lack of sleep on the human body, especially the human mind, and how it can cause perceived paranormal activity. Synchronicity. The belief that a simultaneous occurrence of events which appear significantly related but have no discernible causal connection. Paranormal-related examples of this are a client wakes up in the middle of the night because they hear an entity foraging in the kitchen. They happen to go to the doctor's office that day, and the doctor asks them a bunch of questions to see if there's a possibility of the person having diabetes. They return home and find a cabinet open and find sugar sprinkled on the counter. These three events would appear to be related, but do not have a discernible causal connection. Tachypsychia. That is a neurological condition that distorts the perception of time, usually induced by physical exertion, drug use, or a traumatic event. The misinformation effect. This occurs when a person's recall of episodic memories becomes less accurate because of post-event information. This can lead to someone believing that they experienced a paranormal situation when they did not. For a detailed list of many things that can be misperceived as paranormal activity, please listen to our previous podcast regarding this, and also if you want to visit www.mwvspirit.com, there is a new section that I recently posted up there, and it's an ongoing list of different situations, phenomenon, where people are experiencing paranormal activity when it is actually not. Please visit us online at www.mwvspirit.com, where you can find our social media sites and blog. Thank you for listening to the Mount Washington Valley Spirit Podcast, where we don't like to be normal, we like to be paranormal.